Welcome to Interplay. This is Michael Shapiro, your host, with my special guest today, straight from Berlin, Germany, the American conductor and my close friend, Garrett Keast. Hi, Garrett.
Hey, Michael. Great to see you, man.
Great to see you, too. Well, thank you for joining Interplay and this conversation, which is a bit different than the others we've had so far. The difference is I'm speaking to somebody who is in Germany, who is now living his life as a conductor to a large extent, particularly now with his family and in Germany. You live in Berlin, don't you?
Yeah, of course.
And your travels before this COVID pandemic hit was really all over the globe. You've been, I know, from Sapporo, Japan, down to South America, in Texas, in various areas in the United States, and a lot in Europe, from Finland to Italy to Spain, France, and elsewhere. I know you've been at the Paris Opera and the, I think the Staatsoper in Vienna. Am I wrong? Or the Hofoper?
Yeah, sure.
What's it called these days? And Hamburg.
The Wiener Staatsoper, sure.
Wiener Staatsoper, the ballet in Hamburg, ballet in Finland. So many different places. So for a Texas boy, if I may call you that, young man, how are you finding this transition? It's more than a few years.
Well, thank you. Well, it's great to see you, Michael. It's amazing now. I guess we somehow made it through the transition. It always feels like it. You're right, though. In a way, it always feels like a transition. We've been here 8 years now.
Wow,
our two little boys were born here. It's kind of amazing. And it was a big transition from, it wasn't a transition from Texas, I must say. But that, of course, we met in New York. And I was in New York City for 11 years before here, where I really began my career. But I understand the story is a little more interesting from Texas, of course.
And you're only 29 years old, so it's amazing how early you started.
Yeah, it's amazing. We came over here when I was 21, and started conducting in New York City when I was 10.
I know. I was there. It's amazing. So I just want to know something from you. You have not gone the quotes now traditional route of being an assistant conductor with a major orchestra in the States. Rather, you went to Europe and worked in the system, as it were, the ballet companies, the opera companies, the symphonic orchestras, the radio orchestras. You've done it all over there. And can you talk about the contrast? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what's been so great about working in Europe and especially being based in Germany, because I began my career here in Europe both at the Paris Opera, where I was an assistant on several projects, and then was given my own performances. But then that helped me get into a position at Deutsche Oper Berlin, and that was really amazing because you're really thrown into the repertoire system, this big German opera house, like you're speaking of, like your experience was also working in this big rep house where they're doing 3 performances of La Boheme in the season only, and in the middle of everything else. And it's got to go up with one stage orchestra rehearsal and perhaps one orchestra rehearsal or not, and things like that. So, that was just really, I think it's a really good place to kind of work on your chops and just to really, get all this beyond all this basic experience, where you just have to get in and conduct Magic Flute one night, the next day for the music director preparing, Valkyria or something, and preparing all the ladies in Valkyria or something like that. And then the next day, we have a concert we're preparing, and working with a librarian on all these Rachmaninoff parts, or
it's great stuff.
Just endless things like that.
But I know you did Bluthaus, didn't you, of Haas and other new pieces, haven't you not?
Yeah, sure. That was the premiere of Georg Friedrich Haas's Bluthaus, which is, we did it in Bonn, and we did it also in Festspiel, Schwetzigen Festspiele down near Mannheim. Yes, I mean, that's what's been so great. And then the other part of the equation, like you mentioned, is working my first season. I worked at the NDR Symphony Orchestra in Hamburg, because I had a great introduction there via Christoph Eschenbach as his assistant on Mahler 8. And then we did Unzug Chin and Köchlin, Charles Köchlin, all this Le Banda Log and Unzug Chin's Alice in Wonderland.
It's a very good piece.
and really cool things that, you know, just weren't possible quite in my career 2 years prior in New York City.
NDR is the Northern German Radio Orchestra, Norddeutscher Rundfunkorchester, to be precise. So,
Richtig, ja.
Ja, richtig, natürlich. So, it's good ich habe ein Jahr in der Schweiz gearbeitet, nicht? So, that I spent 1 year in Switzerland. In any event.
On my end, you broke up for a second.
Ja. Well, ich habe ein Jahr in der Schweiz gearbeitet. Ja.
Ja.
Verstehst du?
Ich weiß, in welcher Haus war das? Ich habe vergessen.
Zurich Opera.
Oh, Zurich, yeah, fantastic.
Minor place. So in any event, listen, are you finding dealing with the orchestras, as you guessed, with this radio orchestra and that symphony orchestra, or the ballet or the opera houses, and a lot of these ballet and opera houses have incredible house bands, like in Vienna when you conducted there, it was the Vienna Philharmonic, wasn't it? Basically?
Yes, but I was an assistant there. I have not conducted yet the Vienna Philharmonic, but I have conducted the Tonkünstler Orchestra there many times, and also the Wiener Kammer Orchestra.
Right, but so, do you find dealing with Fort Worth Symphony versus an orchestra in Vienna or Berlin any different, or people are people?
Yeah, I think really people are people. It is. It's interesting. I mean, it just helps to have experience. I mean, I'm not 29, of course. I'm going on, I'm going to be 49 next year. And I think it's, you know, you just come to it with such a different experience after being with so many important orchestras and all kinds of orchestras, every level orchestra I've worked with in Europe, basically. But one thing that's interesting about it, and I would say that here in Germany too, like for instance, last season I did a Bernstein Gala with the Rundfunk Symphony Orchestra Berlin here. And I think I've learned over the years, I used to in the beginning try to speak only in German, but I've learned over the years, being an American, that, and just, you know, just be myself, be friendly, be outgoing, not overly outgoing. You just be cool with the orchestra, with the players, you know, do a good job, come in really well prepared, have something to say. Then it can work really, really well. And it does help to be an Auslander. It does help to be, you know, foreigner in our business, just like it does in the States in a lot of ways. I found that to be the same in a sense. And I think often when I'm conducting an orchestra here in Germany or anywhere in Scandinavia or something, I speak. Well, in Germany, I speak half in English. I speak and I talk about things. I make a little joke, a little quip. I speak in English. I say hello, and I do all the. I just say hello, and like we're going to begin it. Tag Nummer 6, Tag Nummer 666. You know, I say all the beginnings, starting places, the details, some of the specific details in German, and then I go to explaining things in English, and I can be myself. I have a personality. If I'm trying to do things in German, I have no person. I turn into a square box, you know.
That's interesting. I mean, Lenny felt when he conducted the Vienna Philharmonic in the 60s, it was a different story. He had to speak German. And he was, until he got to one point in the first rehearsal, he says, this is not, es kein Mahler. And he says, this is not Mahler. And he finally came out with it. And then they all went like this, because they had done Mahler since Bruno Walter days in the early 50s after the war. And, you know, he said, I got to show them how to do it. So let's talk about Bernstein, played by a German orchestra. I think these days, no matter where, I think people get it. But there was a time where if you tried to do Ives or Gershwin or Bernstein with anything other than a United States or Canadian orchestra, people had difficulty. They couldn't get the swing of it. Do you think that's the case still?
I have to be careful with my words here, but yeah, I mean, I think, well, in Germany, there is a tradition to have big bands kind of playing off to the sides of orchestras. They do have a tradition, for instance, NDR, the NDR radio up in Hamburg does have a big band orchestra, big band. They have a big band, and so does WDR, and so does, I think, SWR, and lots of them. But yeah, for instance, I did this big Bernstein piece in the Staatsoper in Hamburg, and that orchestra is the Philharmonic Orchestra in Hamburg, and it's a really fine orchestra. Kent Nagano's music director. I mean, and we did a lot of things together there with the ballet. And so we're doing this Bernstein dances this last couple seasons. And, you know, what I've noticed about Northern German orchestras, they kind of brass plays things too long. So da 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 da, and I just had to tell them to shorten everything up. Da 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 ba ba da 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 ba ba. You know, like short, quick, have fun with it. You know, and you just tell them like that and sing it for them, and I find they come around. Yeah, so they can play. Sometimes they can play a little too heavy, you know, and too long. And
no, I heard this from some conductors. Some conductors who were recording Ives, for example, in England. In maybe the 60s and 70s, and it wasn't quite with the inflection. Now, I would say it is true, you know, to a certain extent, and lesser in the States, as far as the inflection, the national inflection. For example, when I've heard Tchaikovsky played by a Russian orchestra, a very fine Russian orchestra, it has a feeling like nobody else can do it. You know, there's just a dig into those strings, and they know how to articulate it, and it's their folk, and I think it comes from the folk music tradition, which still has its place in all of our cultures. Not as much as it did, but it still does. I'm curious about now, because it's something you and I have been thinking about. Where do you think art in music, your kind of music, performance music, is going in this age of COVID, and where would you hope it would go?
What I think is great about it is I think a lot of us, I know you and I have talked about this a lot last few months. I mean, a lot of people had perhaps more time to think about it, to focus on what they should be working on, what their goals should be in terms of writing music, in terms of interpreting music, in terms of what kind of music they should be focused on, or the kinds of projects they want to see come to life. And so that's what it's been for me, is really refocusing myself and on what I want to be, what I want to be spending my time on, and what I want to be focusing on, what I think I can make a difference in, what types of music I can make a difference in, you know? So when it comes to that's a very good question. I mean, none of us really know what's going to happen in this next few years, but I do feel, I mean, I am buoyed by recognition that here in Germany and in most of Europe, it looks like the season's going to begin in October, and end of September, October is when the season begins. Everything's going to be more or less knocked down in size, but the concert's going to happen. And so
even opera?
I do. Yeah, there's already been Deutsche Oper Berlin already had an opera performance a few weeks ago.
That's amazing. So what are people coming? Are people coming in with masks?
Yeah, I mean, we've had masks have been the rule from the very beginning in any store and any indoor public place.
No, but un ballo in maschera, in maschera. See,
there you go.
I'm just curious. If you're going to go see Un Ballo in Maschera, you're going in Maschera, and is it a full house, or are they separating people?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking with the manager of the orchestra, the Concerthaus Orchestra, a few weeks ago, because they had a big concert, outdoor concert, with lots of space. They will separate. They have I don't remember how many seats exactly. I think there's 1,500 seats or so in the house, and they can only sell 400 of them, he said.
I see. So that will continue until there's a vaccine, probably. I mean, I've been to La Scala. I don't know how economically they can pull this off. I mean, La Scala is a very intimate place. Those boxes are right on top of each other. Gorgeous. And great acoustics. It's so different than the Metropolitan Opera, which is way too big. But
sure,
the houses in Europe are generally very intimate, and you're right on top, and then the singers are spewing out. You talk about droplets and aerosols. Oh my God! I don't know how it's going to be done with everything.
Well, I imagine, that's a very good question. But it's going to be done with space. It's going to be done with space and lots of adjustments, and I don't know that every opera will be done. You know, I know, for instance, my season begins. I was supposed to begin with an orchestra tour in September. It's postponed until next season, but I will go to the Finnish National Opera for a big new piece called Jekyll and Hyde, and it's a huge orchestra, and we've already been working around that. They have such a fantastic numbers in Finland that they only have like 398 deaths for this whole period. And I think they're almost down to nothing in terms of cases. But so their hope is that we can use the full 85-piece orchestra in the pit. That's their first choice and first hope. And they think there's a good, I think they think there's a 40-50% chance we'll do that. The second choice is we will have pre-recorded the entire piece so that they can broadcast all of it through the sound system. And the other choice is to do several smaller ensemble pieces. So if that happens, we'll do the smaller ensemble things live, which is much more intimate and much more real and touching. And then the larger pieces will have to be broadcast. So,
talking about the future, where do you want to be in 5 years?
Music director of my second orchestra.
Well, that's all having two at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm up for a couple of music directorships. That's a big, important part of my career. I mean, more important than even that is really, I think, I feel like it's been fantastic for me. I grew up more on the symphonic side a bit, but I was always a choral singer. So I was very much wanting to learn the operatic side, but I wasn't really a serious pianist. I was a trombonist, a violist, and a choral singer. So for me, I wanted to catch up on the operatic side, and I worked calling titles at Houston Grand Opera and the Metropolitan Opera, and then I became associate conductor in New York City Opera, and then I started doing a lot of opera as well, regionally in the United States, which was a great experience for me and helped me come over here. And so in a way, I think, even though I wasn't a pianist, I always wanted to do things the old school way. I wanted to really have the opera house experience. It was really important to me. And I think it's actually super important for conducting symphonic concerts. So I kind of feel like after doing all this opera house experience, which I of course want to continue with, now I can go back to my real roots, which was the symphonic repertoire, where I grew up with the Houston Symphony Orchestra and Christoph Eschenbach. And this is a huge repertoire that I'm fascinated by, I love, I admire, and I want to be involved in all that. So yeah, so really the more important aspect for me than even becoming a music director is really to step more and more onto the concert circuit in Europe and in the States.
Well, one thing you do learn from opera, which I know as an opera composer and former co-repetitor, and a co-repetitor my entire life with singers, is breath.
Yeah.
And breath is so important in doing any music. The shaping of the phrase, the hesitancy between phrases and in chords, and the relationship of all of this. It teaches you so much, and you can see in the great symphonic conductors, most of them, except for Furtwängler, they all started in opera. Every single one, Klemper and Toscanini and Walter and all these guys, and Mahler. It all came out of their operatic training. I mean, Lenny came out of Broadway theater. And it always means something to me that when you are studying any piece, if you sing the parts, you learn how to phrase them. It's just amazing coming from the voice. I want to talk to you about repertoire, because I know that your repertoire is very, very wide in symphonic, ballet, and opera. No question about it, and choral music. What pieces would you really like to do coming up? And what pieces have you done that you never want to look at again? Dead composers for the second question, live composers for the first.
Well, I think I'll answer the second one first, if you don't mind, because I have a funny quip about it. But I mean, it's a funny piece to me. The Carmina Burana, super famous piece. Everybody wants to do it. It's always a knockout for the audience. Everybody loves it, but it's a piece I never liked. I don't really love the piece. I don't love to listen to it. I don't love to study it. Yeah, I imagine.
I'm with you.
But then I was asked to jump in and do it in Munich a few years ago, and I did it, and it was a complete blast. I had a ball. I had a ball with the chorus and the orchestra, and it's poppy and fun and energetic, and I have found that another piece that reminds me of that, the Philip Glass Heroes Symphony. I had to do that in Hanover Staatsoper a few years ago in the ballet. I'm not crazy about it, but I mean, it was fun at the time. You have to make, it is important. And I tell every conductor, every musician is so important, is that you have to make it everything you can. You have to put your heart and soul into everything you do. Otherwise, it's just terrible when you don't. You know, you have to make it come to life. You know, every piece. Pieces I'm just dying to do. You mean?
Yes.
Oh, there's a lot, but well, one piece I'm really thrilled about. It's on the schedule, but I don't know if it's going to happen. It's Poulenc's Gloria. It's a fantastic, beautiful piece. I conducted another piece I really want to do again is the Poulenc Dialogues of the Carmelites. I conducted that several years ago. It's just amazing music.
You mentioned the Gloria of Poulenc, you're saying, yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Love that piece. And then Dialogues of the Carmelites I want to come back to. I mean, I studied a lot of Wagner's operas, as you know. We spoke a lot about that.
Yes.
I am very interested in conducting some of those pieces in the future. I mean, I conducted Fliegende Holländer a few years ago, but Tristan is a fascinating piece to me. But then there's really so many great pieces that you don't even have to do all those things. I mean, there Chichester Psalms I'm crazy about. You know, I love that piece. The Songfest I'm working on now to present in September here in Berlin. I'm learning that right now. It's a wonderful piece. So many wonderful poems.
Both by Bernstein.
Yeah.
I have to tell some of our listeners who don't know those.
Sure.
I remember both of them very well and the circumstances of them. I'm curious about also something that you've been thinking about is American music and the presentation of it in Europe right now. Where are you going with that? What are you thinking about?
I'm always amazed how much American music is performed in Europe. There's a lot. They do a lot. And I mean, they mostly do the top, most famous 5 or 6 composers, I must say. So, I mean, you mostly hear Bernstein, John Adams, Philip Glass, Copland, and maybe Barber, you know? So, but there are a lot of other things you do hear bits and pieces of too. So, but every season, I would say every major opera house in Europe, every 3 or 4 seasons does an American piece, you know? When I was at the Royal Swedish Opera, they were doing Candide right when we canceled everything there. So there's a lot being done. I mean, it's amazing. And so being an American here, I've automatically been thought of as somebody to ask to do that. And then, and so I've done, 3 or 4 symphonic engagements a season, mostly focused on American music for the last 3 or 4 years. And occasionally an opera or ballet or something like this. So what I think is amazing about it is that I'm an American guy. I'm from Houston, Texas, and spent a lot of my early years in New York. When I go to an orchestra and I speak to them about and I sing for them how to play Copland or how to play John Adams or how to play, your music, it sounds legitimate. I speak the right way about it,
It's important.
Yeah, and I can sing it the correct way, and I can get them to play it with the right articulation or the lightness or whatever it is, the transparency. And I think that really comes across, and so that's what it is, as you and I have spoken about many times, is that in the last 3 months, is I kind of recognize, and it's been fantastic for me, it's been a really terrible time in the world, and I know it's been a tough one for you a few months ago, 2.5 months ago. And I've lost a few friends to COVID-19 already back home. I think, but for me, the free time I've had and the forced free time was amazing because it made me recognize that, oh yeah, Garrett, and in your career as a conductor or as a violinist or as a pianist or whatever, everybody says, well, you need to focus on something. What is your focus? And for me, it was for a while, I was like, well, I really love Haydn. I love Mozart. I really can do that well. I know I have a great sense. I think I have a pretty good sense for how those articulations work and that phrasing works and a lot of buoyancy and I love that. So that was one thing I was saying. Or Russian music. I did a lot of Rachmaninoff symphonies and Tchaikovsky and all those things. But what I recognized these last 3 months is that, oh yeah, but American music, I already am asked for. I love it. I'm passionate about it. I know a lot of you guys back in the States that are alive writing music right now. And so it just makes more sense for me to, makes complete sense. It aligns with me straight through my body, straight through my feet to the floor, you know, that I should be focused on American music. And, you know, in my 60s and 70s, I want to be the guy that's asked to conduct Copland's Third Symphony, or to, you know, to do Chichester Psalms, or to do your Archangel, you know, all these things. I want to be somebody that gets to do those things. And if I'm not working on that now, I'm working on my glide slope, you know. It's not
well, let's just hope I can hear Archangel before I meet the Archangel, okay? So
yeah, I think you can.
I want to talk to you about phrasing, and something that I've noticed in conductors, and I ask this of other conductors as well, and I ask it of myself. As a conductor, and I've done a lot of the standard rep, as you know, I think there's certain music I can do very well because it's innate, and then there's certain music, a smaller percentage, but some things I just cannot do because I don't have an emotional response to it. For example, I would never, ever want to conduct or understand or get anywhere near a Bruckner symphony. It is just not for me.
Okay.
Aaron Copland hated Sibelius. He said he'd rather watch paint dry. I mean, there are some composers who we are not fitted for. To use a very famous example, Toscanini, greatest conductor of Verdi and wonderful conductor of Wagner, great conductor of Beethoven, and some of Brahms. However, not Mozart, man. That 40th Symphony? Oh my God.
Sure.
So are there composers, I think your Stravinsky and Strauss are exceptional, Richard Strauss. There's something in you that responds to both of them, and they're polar opposites. Can you talk to about yourself in this circumstance?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's a good question. You wonder how that stuff comes up in your mind and how that comes through your body and how that actually works. You know, in high school, I remember I was in the band. I was a trombone player in the band in Houston, Texas. So I didn't really. My mother played orchestral music often on the.
I think it's something innate, and this is a very interesting subject as one of our final discussions of this beautiful talk together. Is that there's certain things that I think are innately there, and there's certain things that are not. And I think one thing in recognizing one's powers is to recognize, you know, conductors want to do everything. It's a gig. I got to make money. But sometimes when you get to, you know, choose your repertoire, not be chosen for it, one can start to analyze, you know what? I can really get around Ariadne of Naxos like you did in Virginia Opera. Man, you understood it. And the legato you got and the way you had the singers floating out of your hands. It was just, and the instrumentalists with you, it was something to hear. But then you can conduct Dumbarton Oaks. I can't believe that, you know, think of the variety there. It's remarkable. But, you know, I don't know if you're there yet in figuring out, well, at your age, are there certain people I want to just stay away from? I'm not asking you to name them yet, because who knows, you might get hired for it next week.
Oh, well, I mean, there are things. Of course, there are things. Sure. I think I recognize that already. I'm not sure if I have one on the tip of my tongue, but yes, there are. And I found them before. And certainly there are pieces.
Yeah, something that's very disjunct and doesn't come to the human heart, I think, is a problem for Garrett Keast, because I think you are a very warm human being and that you like to see human connection in everything you do. So my final question to you is human connection and hope in this time of COVID-19, you know, like Gabriel Marquez says, in the time of cholera. So we're in the time of COVID. You have to protect your family first and foremost, no question. And spreading out from there is now you're going to be your life going all over. But you've been home now, probably for the first time for a long period of time, in a long time. How's that human contrast been, and what are your hopes for your wonderful wife and those two little boys?
Well, you're right. It's been amazing. And I mean, we've been here since March 17 or 18, and we got back from Sweden. It has been really great. tonight I'm not there putting the boys down. They're going to down right now, basically. Because here we are speaking at, it's like, I don't know what time it is, time 2:30 or something. It's 8:30 in the evening here. And sometimes I hear a little note back from my wife. Oh, Oliver had a tear tonight. He was really missing you when you weren't there. But often, of course, I'm gone for 2 weeks at a time, or a week at a time, or 3 weeks at a time. Every single variety, I'm gone for a period of time. Yeah. So it's been amazing in that way that we've had all this family time, and I do feel really lucky and pleased to be here in Germany, where things are going really well and it's taken care of quite well. But when it comes to music and people and the reasons why we do this, and I always find that amazing to me, because I mean, like you're very kind to say, I love people. I love being in a room with people. I love the music too. I can sit in a room and listen to recordings all day long. But when it comes to conducting, somehow for me, I always was interested in, of course, leadership in some way, but music is for me the most interesting way to be involved with people. And I just love trying to get the most out of a group and work with people and smile while I'm conducting when it's a moment to, and enjoy the process and collaborate, to really collaborate with people. And that's what it's all about. I mean, there's nothing better than that. It's not about conducting every possible performance of Brahms symphonies you can. It's about connecting, and it's about making music. It's just about being like a chamber musician, just like I think it is playing chamber music in any kind of group.
Yeah, I think so. So my brother from another mother, dear Garrett Keast, conductor, fabulous musician, thank you for being on Interplay, Conversations in Music. It's been wonderful to see you. And yes, we did meet through music, and we will be together in music forever. Thanks, Garrett, for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's been really, really fun. Great to see you.
Great to see you. This has been Garrett Keast, conductor, originally from Texas, now in Berlin, Germany, conducting all over the world. This is Michael Shapiro, your host on Interplay, Conversations in Music.